What if I told you that the reason you're broke has almost nothing to do with how much money you make, and everything to do with what you do between paychecks when nobody is watching? Because here's the truth that financial advisors rarely say out loud: most people don't have an income problem, they have a behavior problem. And that behavior problem is made up of tiny, invisible, deeply comfortable habits that feel completely harmless in the moment, but are systematically draining every dollar of potential wealth you will ever generate. Today, we are going to expose every single one of those habits. Not to shame you, but to show you exactly what's happening inside your psychology when you make these choices. Because once you understand the why behind the behavior loses its power over you permanently. Let's start with the one habit that is so normalized it's practically invisible, and that is lifestyle inflation, also known as keeping up with the expense of your own success. Every time your income goes up, your spending goes up with it, sometimes faster. You get a raise and suddenly you need a better car. You land a promotion and the apartment that was perfectly fine last year starts to feel too small. Your brain does this automatically through a psychological mechanism called hedonic adaptation. The same process that makes a new phone feel ordinary within 2 weeks of buying it. Your nervous system adapts to new levels of comfort and pleasure so rapidly that what once felt like luxury quickly becomes your new baseline. And anything below that baseline starts to feel like deprivation. So you keep spending more to maintain the feeling of having more, but the feeling never actually stays. It just keeps moving the goalposts further out. And what this means financially is catastrophic. Your wealth is not determined by how much you earn. It is determined by the gap between what you earn and what you spend. And lifestyle inflation systematically destroys that gap no matter how successful you become. The solution isn't to live in misery. It's to consciously delay the upgrade, to let your wealth grow before your lifestyle does, to build the habit of banking the raise before your nervous system even knows it arrived. But most people never do this because the second habit is working against them at the exact same time. And that habit is the complete absence of a financial plan, which the brain interprets not as freedom, but as permission to spend. When there is no budget, no savings target, no investment goal, no number you are working toward, your brain defaults to the path of least psychological resistance, which is always immediate gratification. Psychologists call this decision fatigue when you haven't made a clear plan in advance. Every financial decision requires fresh mental energy to evaluate, and a tired, unplanned brain almost always chooses comfort over discipline. The people who say, "I'm terrible with money," almost universally mean, "I've never built a system that makes good money behavior automatic." Because willpower alone, which is what you're relying on without a plan, is a depletable resource that runs out by Thursday evening when you're tired, hungry, and the online shopping app is one tap away. A financial plan doesn't restrict your freedom. It creates it, because when your savings are automated, your investments are scheduled, and your essential expenses are covered. Everything left is genuinely guilt-free spending. And that clarity alone changes the entire emotional relationship you have with money. Now, let's talk about the habit that is perhaps the most psychologically seductive of all, and that is buying things to feel something. This is not about weak character or poor discipline. This is about dopamine, which is the brain's primary reward chemical, and the retail industry has spent billions of dollars across decades studying exactly how to trigger it. The moment you see something you want, whether it's a pair of shoes, a new gadget, a course you'll never finish, or food you didn't plan to eat, your brain releases a spike of dopamine that mimics the feeling of having already received the reward. This is why shopping feels good before you buy anything. The anticipation itself is the high. And once that dopamine spike arrives, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, long-term thinking part of your brain, goes partially offline, which is why you can justify almost any purchase in the moment with logic that would embarrass you the next morning. I deserve this. It's on sale, so I'm actually saving money. I'll return it if I don't use it. This is the last time. These are not decisions. They are dopamine rationalizations, and they are keeping you broke one impulse purchase at a time. The habit of emotional spending is not solved by restriction, it's solved by substitution. You have to find other dopamine sources that don't cost money. Exercise, creative work, deep conversation, learning. And you have to build a pause between the impulse and the purchase. Because research consistently shows that a 24 to 48 hour waiting period on non-essential purchases causes the dopamine spike to subside and rational evaluation to return. And most of the time, you simply don't want the thing anymore once the chemical fog has cleared. Let's move to a habit that operates completely below conscious awareness for most people, and that is the habit of paying everyone else first and yourself last, or in many cases, not at all. Every month, the rent gets paid, the phone bill gets paid, the subscriptions get paid, the groceries get paid, the social obligations get paid. And then, whatever is left over, which is often nothing, is supposedly what you save. This is the financial behavior of the vast majority of the population, and it is precisely backwards. Wealthy people, and more importantly, people with a wealthy mindset, operate on the principle of paying themselves first, which means the moment income arrives, a predetermined percentage goes directly into savings or investment before a single other expense is considered, and then you live on what remains. This is not just a budgeting tip, it's a profound psychological reframe. When you pay yourself first, you are sending a message to your own subconscious that your future is a priority, that your wealth matters, that you are worth investing in. And when you consistently pay yourself last, or not at all, you are reinforcing the opposite belief, which is that everyone and everything in your life deserves your resources before you do. And that scarcity is simply your permanent condition. The automation of self-payment removes willpower from the equation entirely, which is the only reliable way to make any financial habit stick long-term. Now here's a habit that sounds completely counterintuitive. And that is the habit of avoiding financial information because it feels overwhelming or shameful. Most broke people don't track their spending. They don't open bank statements with full attention. They don't know their exact monthly expenses. They don't know their net worth. In fact, many avoid calculating it because they're afraid of what the number will confirm. Psychologists call this financial avoidance, and it is driven by a very human mechanism called ostrich effect, named after the myth of the ostrich burying its head in the sand. When information feels threatening to our sense of self, the brain literally motivates us to look away, to not know, to stay comfortable in vague financial anxiety, rather than face the sharp discomfort of precise financial reality. But here's the thing. The vague anxiety is always worse than the precise reality. once you actually see the numbers, the brain can begin to problem solve. Because the brain is an extraordinary planning machine when given clear inputs. It's the fog of not knowing that paralyzes. So the habit of looking, of tracking every rupee or dollar, of reading your statements, of calculating where you actually stand, is not just financially useful, it is psychologically liberating. Because knowledge, even uncomfortable knowledge, always feels better than the chronic, low-level dread of avoidance. Let's now talk about the social habits that silently drain wealth. Because money is never just personal, it's deeply social. And the social pressures around spending are some of the most powerful and least examined forces in personal finance psychology. The habit of social spending, going out because others are going, buying gifts you can't afford because of social expectation, upgrading your lifestyle to match your peer group, saying yes to plans that don't align with your financial reality, is driven by one of the most ancient psychological drives in human nature, which is the need for belonging and status. Evolutionary psychologists point out that being excluded from the tribe was historically equivalent to a death sentence, which is why the fear of social rejection is neurologically wired to feel as physically painful as actual bodily harm. This means that saying, "I can't afford that," at a dinner table triggers a survival-level emotional response in the brain: shame, fear, exclusion. And most people would rather go into debt than feel that feeling in public. The financially intelligent habit is not social isolation. It's the development of a personal financial identity strong enough to withstand social pressure, which means being genuinely comfortable saying, "That's not in my budget right now," without attaching it to shame, and surrounding yourself with people whose financial values align with yours, because social environments are either the greatest tailwind or the most consistent headwind in your financial journey. Now, let's examine one of the most financially destructive habits in the modern world. And it has nothing to do with spending. It's the habit of trading time for money indefinitely without ever building anything that generates income without your direct presence. This is the employee trap, and it's a trap not because employment is bad, but because when your only source of income requires your continuous physical and mental presence to exist, you have created a financial structure that is one layoff, one health crisis, or one unexpected event away from complete collapse. The habit of never developing a secondary income stream, never building a skill set that can be monetized independently, never creating any form of asset, never investing even a small amount regularly, is the habit that keeps the ceiling permanently low. And the psychological barrier here is almost always one of two things: the belief that you don't have enough money to start investing, or the belief that building something on the side is only for special, unusually talented people. Both of these beliefs are false. Compound interest doesn't require large initial amounts. It requires consistency and time. And building a secondary income stream doesn't require genius. It requires identifying one skill you already have, one problem you can solve for someone else, and the discipline to show up for it consistently. The habit shift is from "I will start when I have more" to "I will start with exactly what I have right now." Because the person who starts small and stays consistent will always, mathematically and psychologically, outperform the person who waits for perfect conditions that never actually arrive. Let me now address the habit that quietly undermines every other positive financial change a person tries to make. And that is the habit of negative financial self-talk. The sentences you repeat to yourself about money: "I'm terrible with money," I'll never be rich. Money is always tight for people like us. I always end up broke no matter what I do. Are not observations, they are instructions. Your subconscious mind does not evaluate these statements for accuracy. It accepts them as commands and then organizes your perception and behavior to make them true. This is called the self-fulfilling prophecy effect, and it is one of the most robustly documented phenomena in all of social psychology. The brain is a confirmation machine. It actively filters reality to find evidence that supports your existing beliefs, which means a person who believes they are bad with money will unconsciously notice every financial mistake they make and unconsciously ignore every financial win, thereby continuously reinforcing the original belief in a loop that has no natural exit. Breaking this loop requires the deliberate, consistent practice of catching these statements when they arise, questioning their accuracy, and replacing them with statements that are both honest and expansive. Not toxic positivity, but genuine cognitive reframing. Not "I'm rich" when you're not, but "I am actively learning to manage money better. I am building financial awareness. Every small decision I make differently today is compounding into a different future." These new statements, repeated with consistency, begin to rewire the neural pathways that govern financial belief, and that rewiring, over time, changes behavior, and changed behavior changes outcomes, and changed outcomes change identity, and a changed identity is the only permanent solution to any financial problem that has ever existed. And this brings us to the final and most important habit of all: the habit of waiting. Waiting until you know more. Waiting until you earn more. Waiting until the timing is better. The economy is better. The circumstances are more favorable. Waiting is the master habit that makes every other bad financial habit permanent, because it removes urgency from positive change, while time, the single most valuable ingredient in any wealth-building equation, continues to disappear. The psychological seduction of waiting is that it feels responsible. It feels like patience. It feels like wisdom. But there is a profound difference between strategic patience, waiting for the right moment within a context of active preparation, and passive waiting, which is using the future as a psychological dumping ground for actions you are too comfortable or too afraid to take today. The research on deathbed regrets, documented most famously by palliative care nurse Bronnie Ware, consistently shows that people don't regret the things they tried and failed. They regret the things they never tried at all, the versions of themselves they never became, the financial lives they kept postponing until postponing became their permanent condition. So, the most important habit you can build, starting today, not next Monday, not next month, not when you feel ready, because you will never feel ready, is the habit of beginning. Beginning imperfectly, beginning small, beginning scared, but beginning. Because every single financial transformation in human history, without exception, started not with a perfect plan or perfect timing, but with one imperfect, courageous, slightly terrifying first step, taken by someone who was tired enough of waiting to finally, permanently begin.